I'm a fairly experienced hiker. I've done sections of the Appalachian Trail, I've spent weeks in the Rockies. I know how to read a map, use a compass, and stay alive. Which is why what happened to me in the autumn of 2019 is so unsettling. I was doing a 3-day solo hike in a remote section of the George Washington National Forest in Virginia. It was a loop I'd done before, but not for a few years. The second day was a long 15-mile trek over a ridge. The weather was perfect, the fall colors were blazing. Around 4 p.m. I realized I had made a mistake. A stupid rookie mistake. I'd been enjoying the views, autopiloting, and I had missed a crucial unmarked turnoff. I checked my map and my GPS. I was about 2 miles off the main trail in a thick, uncharted part of the forest. No problem, I thought. I'll just bushwhack due west. I'll hit the trail eventually. The forest here was different. Older. The trees were thicker, the canopy so dense it was already getting dark, even though the sun hadn't set. The ground was a spongy carpet of pine needles that muffled my footsteps. It was completely silent. After about an hour of pushing through thick brush, I was tired, scratched up, and getting worried. The sun was definitely going down. I needed to find a flat spot to make camp. That's when I found the road. It wasn't a road really, more of a wide, overgrown track. It wasn't on my map. It was just 2 ruts in the dirt heading down into a dark hollow. I was exhausted. A road, even an old one, was easier to walk on than dense forest. My map showed a river in this general direction. I figured the road must lead somewhere, maybe to an old hunting camp. So I turned and I followed the road down. The further I went, the darker it got. The trees, mostly hemlock and pine, closed in overhead, making a tunnel. The air grew cold and still, and I started to smell smoke. What smoke? My heart lifted. A campfire. A hunter. Someone who could help. Hello? I called out, my voice sounding small. Hello? Anyone there? No answer. Just the sound of my own boots. The road ended abruptly in a large clearing. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. It was a village, or what was left of one. There were 4 or 5 small cabins, made of dark, rough-hewn logs, assembled in a rough circle. They looked ancient, not 19th century. Older. The roofs were sagging. The wood was black with age. In the center of the clearing was a large, smoldering fire pit, the source of the smoke, but there was no one there. Hello? I called again, louder. A single dog barked, a deep, menacing woof. It came from inside the largest cabin, the one at the far end of the clearing. I froze. A dog. That meant people. Hello? I tried again. I'm lost. I'm a hiker. I need to find the trail. The door of the large cabin creaked open. A sliver of yellow light cut into the dusk. A woman stepped out. She was old, very old. She was wearing a simple homespun dress, like something out of a history book. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She was holding a lit kerosene lamp. She just stood on the porch staring at me. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. "You're off the path," she said. Her voice was a dry, reedy rasp. I felt a wave of relief so strong my knees buckled. Yes, I am. I'm so sorry to bother you, I missed my turn, can you tell me where the main trail is? She stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. The dog inside barked again, a low grumble. The woman said something over her shoulder in a language I didn't recognize. The dog went silent. "No trail here," she said, turning back to me. "This is our place." "Oh, I understand," I stammered. "Look, I'm sorry. I'll just go. Can you just point me west? My car is parked at the western access point." She considered this. Her eyes were dark, and in the lamplight they looked empty. "West," she finally said and pointed, not with her finger, but with her whole stiff arm, toward a small dark opening in the trees on the other side of the clearing. It didn't look like a path. It looked like a hole. Is that a trail?" I asked. "It's the way out," she said. A man's voice called from inside the cabin. Again in that strange guttural language. The woman turned her head and shouted back at him, an angry, sharp sound. Then she looked at me. Her expression had changed. It was no longer annoyance. It was fear. "You need to go," she whispered, her voice urgent. He doesn't like strangers. Go. Now." That's when I heard it. The thud of heavy boots inside. The sound of a large wooden bar being lifted from a door. "Go," she hissed, and she threw the lantern. It didn't hit me. It hit the ground in front of me, shattering and erupting in a whoosh of flame. The fire spread instantly to the dry pine needles, creating a wall of fire between me and the cabin. Through the flames, I saw the door of the cabin fly open. The man who came out was huge. He was well over 6 feet, broad as a refrigerator, and wearing overalls. He had a massive, tangled black beard. He held a rusty, double-bit axe. He roared. It was a sound of pure animal rage. He saw me. He saw the fire. "Run!" the old woman screamed. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and sprinted for the dark opening in the trees she had pointed to. I could hear him roaring behind me. I could hear the crunch of his boots as he chased me. I burst through the hole in the trees and found a path. It was narrow, steep, and dark, but it was a path. I ran, sliding on loose rocks, branches tearing at my jacket. I could hear him behind me. He was fast, and he wasn't alone. I heard more shouting from the village, more barking. I ran for my life. My lungs were on fire. My legs were jelly. I just kept thinking about that axe. After maybe 5 minutes of a dead sprint, I tripped. I went sprawling, rolling down a steep embankment, and landed hard in a shallow, leaf-choked ditch. My head hit something. For a second, I saw stars. I lay there, winded, my ankle screaming in pain. I heard them. They were on the path just above me. The man with the axe and 2 others. They had lanterns. Their beams cut through the trees. I held my breath. I pressed my face into the mud and dead leaves. They were talking in that language. It was harsh, angry. They were searching. One of them shined his light right at me. I closed my eyes, bracing for it. The light passed over me. They argued for another minute. Then I heard them walking away, back up the path, back toward the village. I lay in that ditch for an hour. I didn't move a muscle. I just lay there, shaking, until the forest was completely, totally silent again. I pulled myself up. My ankle was sprained, but not broken. I checked my compass. The woman had been telling the truth. The path was heading west. I walked all night. I didn't use my headlamp. I just walked. Every shadow looked like a man with an axe. At dawn, I stumbled onto the Appalachian Trail. I have never been so happy to see a white trail marker in my life. I hiked the 10 miles back to my car, got in, and drove to the nearest ranger station. I told them what happened. The ranger, a guy in his 50s, just nodded. He looked tired. "Son," he said, "you found the hollow? That's what the old-timers call it. People get lost, they find that road. Most of them, they don't come back." "Who are they?" I asked. "No one knows. Some say they're pre-colonial. Some weird, isolated family line that's been up there for 500 years. They don't take kindly to trespassers. The Forest Service has an unofficial policy. We don't go in there. And they don't come out." He looked at me hard. "You're lucky. The old woman, she must have liked you. She saved your life." He was right. I think about that. I think about that village hidden for centuries. I think about the man with the axe. And I think about the fact that in a forest that's supposed to be empty, there are people, and they're still living by their own rules. My grandfather, my dedushka, used to tell me stories. He was a stern man, a man who had fled his homeland in Eastern Europe during the Cold War and never looked back. He refused to speak his native language. He refused to cook the food. He was American, first and foremost. But at night, when he thought everyone was asleep, I would hear him humming these sad, discordant folk songs. When he passed away, I inherited his personal effects. Tucked in the back of a drawer, I found an old leather-bound book. It was a diary. It was written in a language I didn't understand, but there was one word written over and over that I recognized from an old letter: Kurov's Hollow. I became obsessed. With the help of online translators and genealogy websites, I pieced together the story. Kurov's Hollow was a small, isolated village in a remote, mountainous region of his home country. It was where our family had lived for centuries. He had fled from there as a young man. His last entry, dated 1953, was frantic. "They know. They will not let me leave. I must go before the long night. I'm a historian by trade." This was a mystery I couldn't resist. I saved my money for 2 years and finally I booked a trip. I was going to find Kurov's Hollow. Getting there was an ordeal. I flew into the capital, took a rattling 8-hour train ride to a provincial town, and then hired a driver. The driver, a weary-looking man named Stefan, raised an eyebrow when I showed him the name on my map. "Kurov's Hollow?" he said, his English halting. "This is not a place for tourists. It is empty. It's where my family is from," I explained. "I'm a historian." He shrugged, a gesture that meant it's your funeral. "The road is bad. Very bad. We go as far as we can. Then you walk." He wasn't kidding. The road deteriorated from cracked asphalt to gravel to nothing more than a muddy track through a dense, ancient pine forest. The trees were so tall and thick they blotted out the sun. Finally, he stopped at a rickety wooden bridge over a shallow, rocky stream. "This is it," he said, lighting a cigarette. "The bridge is not safe for the car. The village, maybe 2-3 kilometers. You walk. You're not coming?" I asked. He gave me a look I'll never forget. It was pity. No. I'll wait. You be back before dark, he said, pointing at the sun, which was already sinking low. This place ain't chisto. Unclean. I grabbed my backpack, my camera, and my walking stick. The air was cold even in midsummer. The only sound was the rushing stream and the wind in the pines. I crossed the bridge, the planks groaning under my weight. The path on the other side was overgrown, but still visible. It was clear no car had been down it in decades. The forest was eerily silent. No birds, no squirrels. Just the crunch of my own boots on the pine needles. After about 40 minutes of walking uphill, the trees thinned and I stepped out into a clearing. My heart leaped. It was Kurov's Hollow. It was arrested in time. It wasn't a ruin, not really. It was a cluster of about a dozen small, dark wooden houses clinging to the side of a steep hill. A simple, onion-domed church, its cross askew, stood at the highest point. The houses were all intact, but the wood was silvered with age. Weeds choked the small garden plots. It looked exactly like a village from the 1950s. A village that had been abandoned in a single day. I felt a thrill of discovery mixed with a profound, creeping sadness. I walked down the main street, which was just a mud path. A child's toy, a small hand-carved wooden horse, lay on its side near a doorway. A cooking pot, black with rust, sat on a cold, outdoor hearth. I pulled out my grandfather's journal. I found the house he described. It was one of the larger ones, set a little apart from the others. The door was ajar, hanging on one hinge. I pushed it open. The creak echoed across the entire village. Inside it was dark. The air was thick with the smell of dust, mold, and something else. Something musky, like a wet animal. Sunlight struggled through the single, grime-covered window. I could see a table overturned. A few pieces of simple furniture, all covered in a thick blanket of gray dust. It looked like the family had left in a hurry. I was in the main room when I heard it. A thump. It came from upstairs. I froze. My entire body went rigid. I held my breath, listening. It must have been the house settling. A rat. It had to be. I waited. Silence. I slowly let out my breath and took a step back toward the door. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate steps, walking across the wooden floor directly above my head. Hello? I called out, my voice sounding weak and thin. Is someone there? The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was heavier and more terrifying than the noise had been. I heard a new sound. A low, wet snuffling. Like a large animal sniffing the floorboards. I didn't need to be a historian to interpret this. I was not alone. This was not a hiker. This was not a tourist. I backed out of the house, slowly, my eyes fixed on the dark, narrow staircase in the corner of the room. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to make a sound. As I stepped backward out of the doorway and into the fading sunlight, my camera, which was hanging around my neck, bumped against the doorframe. It made a loud clack. From the window on the second floor, a face. It wasn't a face. Not really. It was pale. It was wrong. It was elongated, with no hair, and the eyes were just black pits. It was there for a fraction of a second, just a pale shape pressed against the dirty glass. And then it was gone. I ran. I didn't care about the path. I just ran. I sprinted through the center of the village, my boots sucking at the mud. I could hear behind me the crash of the front door of my grandfather's house being thrown open. I heard a call. It wasn't a word. It was a sound. A deep, guttural, howling cry that echoed off the mountains. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a bear. It was a voice. And from the other houses, it was answered. Low, terrible calls, shuffling sounds, movement in the shadows of the doorways I had just walked past. The entire village was waking up. I ran so fast my lungs burned. I didn't look back. I could hear them. They weren't fast, but they were heavy. The sound of large bodies moving through the brush, snapping twigs, snuffling, calling to each other in those awful, guttural voices. I burst out of the forest clearing and onto the path, stumbling, falling to my knees, and scrambling back up. I could hear them in the woods, tracking me, moving parallel to the path. I finally saw the bridge. I saw Stefan's car. He was outside, smoking, leaning against the hood. When he saw me, his eyes went wide. He didn't ask what happened. He just dropped his cigarette, yelled, "Davy, go!" and jumped into the driver's seat. I sprinted across the bridge, the planks rattling. I ripped open the passenger door and fell into the car. Go, go, I screamed, pulling the door shut. Stefan already had the car in reverse. He spun it around in a spray of gravel, the tires screaming. As we sped away, I looked back. At the far end of the bridge, 3 of them had emerged from the trees. They were large, hunched over, dressed in what looked like the tattered, rotted remains of old clothing. They were pale, their limbs too long. They just stood there watching us go. We drove for 20 minutes in complete silence before Stefan finally spoke. "They do not like to be remembered," he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I never found out what they were. I never read the rest of my grandfather's journal. When I got home, I burned it. I think I understand now. He wasn't fleeing a regime. He was fleeing them. He wasn't a refugee. He was an escapee. And in Kurov's Hollow, the long night he wrote about, I don't think it ever ends." My sister Clara had this ugly-ass-in music box. It was a cheap carousel-themed thing our grandmother gave her, and it played a tinny off-key version of Fur Elise. Clara loved that thing. She died when she was 8 and I was 12. Cancer. It was quick and it was awful. After she was gone, I couldn't stand to look at that music box. The day of her funeral, I took it, rode my bike to the edge of town, and buried it in a metal box under the old railway bridge. It was my way of saying goodbye. 2 years later, our town died too. I grew up in Ethel, West Virginia. It was a small chemical town built entirely around a single plant. In 1999, there was a spill, not a small one. A catastrophic pipeline failure that contaminated the ground, the water, everything. The company bought us all out. Ethel became a ghost town, a Superfund site. Fenced off with no trespassing signs every 10 feet. We moved to Ohio. Life went on. 20 years passed. I was 34. My mom had just passed away, the last of my immediate family. Going through her things, I found a box of Clara's old drawings. The last one she drew was of her and me under the railway bridge, with a dotted line pointing to a spot marked, "Our Secret." It hit me like a punch to the gut. That music box. I don't know why, but I became consumed with this idea. I had to go back. I had to get it. It was stupid, it was irrational, and it was probably dangerous. But it felt like the last piece of my family was still in that poison town, waiting for me. I did my research. Ethel was a no-go zone. But I also found forums for urban explorers who had been inside. They said the fences were down in spots and the security was non-existent. The real danger wasn't getting caught, it was the hot zones. I took a week off work, rented a car, and drove to the border of my old hometown. I parked a mile away and walked in wearing heavy boots, thick gloves, and a high-grade respirator mask. The feeling? I can't describe it. It was like walking into my own decaying memory. The fences were gone, just rusted poles. The main street was cracked, with full-grown trees pushing up through the asphalt. My childhood home. The roof had caved in. It was just a skeleton. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the quiet of the countryside. It was a dead, heavy chemical silence. No birds, no insects. Even the wind felt dead. The only sound was the hiss of my own breathing in the respirator and the crunch of my boots on the broken pavement. I made my way through the wreckage of my past, heading toward the old railway bridge. It was on the far side of town, across the creek that had been the source of the contamination. It was now a dry, black, oily-looking scar in the earth. The bridge was still standing, a rusted, skeletal trestle. I scrambled down the polluted embankment, my heart pounding in my chest. I found the spot, the big concrete support. I remembered the loose rock I had used as a marker. I pulled out the small shovel I'd brought. The ground was hard, packed. It took me 20 minutes, my breath fogging the inside of my mask, but then I heard it, the thunk of metal on metal. My hands were shaking. I pulled the rusted metal box out of the ground. It was an old biscuit tin. I sat back on my heels, breathing hard. I felt a sense of relief. A crazy, stupid mission accomplished. I was about to pry it open when I heard a noise, a bang. It was metal on metal. It came from inside the town. I froze. I'd been in Ethel for over an hour. I hadn't seen a soul. I hadn't heard a single sound that I didn't make. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The hiss of my mask. My own heartbeat. Bang. Closer this time. It was rhythmic. Bang, bang, bang. Like someone hitting a metal pole with a hammer. I crammed the biscuit tin into my backpack, stood up, and peeked over the edge of the embankment. I could see Main Street about 300 yards away. There was a man there. He was standing in the middle of the road, next to the one remaining flagpole in front of the old town hall. He was holding a tire iron, and he was hitting the metal flagpole with it. Bang, bang, bang. He was wearing a hazmat suit, not a modern one. An old, yellow, full-body suit with a round, bug-eyed gas mask. It was filthy, stained with black grime. I ducked back down, my blood turning to ice. A security guard? A cop? No, this felt wrong. The way he was moving, it was jerky, unnatural. The banging stopped. The silence that rushed in was more terrifying than the noise. I held my breath. I counted to 30. Nothing. Maybe he was gone. Maybe he hadn't seen me. I had to leave. I had to get back to my car. But my path took me right past town hall. My only other option was to cross the poison creek, and that was not an option. I decided to risk it. I'd stay low, use the collapsed houses for cover, and move fast. I crawled up the embankment, keeping my head down. I got behind the ruin of the old library. I peeked around the corner. He was gone. The street was empty. The flagpole was just a flagpole. I let out a shaky breath. I was clear. I stood up and started to walk fast down the street, keeping to the shadows. I passed the old diner, the collapsed gas station. I was almost at the edge of town. I could see the break in the trees where I'd come in. I was walking past the front of the town hall on the other side of the street. I glanced at the flagpole. Lying at its base was the tire iron. And then I heard a sound from inside the town hall. A heavy, scraping sound, like a metal chair being dragged across a tile floor. I stopped. The building was a wreck. The front doors were gone, just an empty black hole. From the darkness inside, a voice spoke. It was a slow, distorted, gurgling sound, amplified by a speaker, like a broken drive-through intercom. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. I couldn't. A figure stepped out of the darkness of the doorway. The man in the yellow hazmat suit. He was holding something in his gloved hand. A small, portable radio. The source of the voice. He just stood there, tilting his head, the big round glass eyes of his mask fixed on me. "Clarice, secret," the speaker gurgled. My heart stopped. It just stopped. How could he know? How could he possibly know? "It's not safe to play in this creek," the speaker rasped. He took a step toward me. A slow, shuffling, heavy-booted step. I found my legs. I ran. I ran like I had never run in my life. I crashed through the trees, branches whipping my face. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I got to my car. I threw my pack in the passenger seat, ripped off my respirator, and started the engine. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror. He was there. At the edge of the woods, right where the "No trespassing" sign used to be. The yellow suit was bright against the dead brown of the forest. He was just watching me go. I drove for 6 hours straight. I didn't stop until I was home. When I got inside, I locked the door, went to my kitchen, and finally opened the biscuit tin. It was empty. It wasn't rusted through. It wasn't full of dirt. The seal was still good, but it was completely, perfectly empty. I never told anyone this. Who would believe me? The town of Ethel is gone. It's a toxic wasteland. But I know with a certainty that chills me to my bone, it's not abandoned. There are still residents, and they don't like visitors. My name is Mark. My friend Ben and I used to run a small-time YouTube channel. We were urban explorers, or urbexers. We'd find abandoned buildings, hospitals, factories, whatever, and we'd film ourselves exploring. We were always careful, always respectful. Take only pictures, leave only footprints. It was our motto. We were always looking for the next big location, and we found it. A place called Iron Bell, Colorado. Iron Bell was a silver mining town high in the Rockies, booming in the 1880s and dead by the 1920s. The silver vein ran dry and the entire town just packed up and left. Because it was so remote, it was never torn down. It just sat there, frozen in time, for 100 years. We planned the trip for months. It was a 3-hour drive from Denver, and then a 2-mile hike up a treacherous, washed-out mining road. We carried 50-pound packs with camera gear, audio equipment, drones, and survival gear. We arrived at the town just after noon. It was breathtaking and creepy. It was a small, high-altitude valley. About 30 buildings were still standing. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, and a dozen or so houses, all made of gray, weathered wood. The wind was the only sound, whistling through the empty window frames. We set up a base camp in the least collapsed building, the old general store. We spent the first few hours just filming. We got incredible drone shots of the whole valley. We filmed the inside of the saloon, the player piano still sitting in the corner, its keys yellowed. Ben was our audio guy. He was obsessed with capturing the ambience. He brought a bunch of high-end digital audio recorders. He placed them in different buildings all over the village. One in the saloon, one in the blacksmith shop, one in the small, collapsed church. He'd leave them running for hours to capture the sound of the ghost town. As the sun started to go down, the temperature plummeted. The wind picked up and it started to howl. It was a high-pitched, mournful sound. "Man, this audio is going to be epic," Ben said, rubbing his gloved hands together. We made dinner on our camp stove and reviewed the footage. It was all gold. Around 10 p.m., we zipped ourselves into our sub-zero sleeping bags. We were on cots in the middle of the general store. It was pitch black. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. I had to pee. I fumbled for my headlamp, clicked it on, and stepped outside. The stars. I'd never seen anything like it. The sky was a solid, glittering sheet of white. It was dead silent. The wind had stopped, and then I heard it. Click, click, click. It was a faint, metallic sound, like a hammer on stone, but irregular. It was coming from up the valley. I shined my headlamp in that direction. The beam just cut a cone into the darkness. At the far end of the valley, maybe 400 yards away, was the entrance to the Iron Bell mine. It was just a black square on the side of the mountain. Click, click, click. I told myself it was just rocks falling, the town settling, but it was too regular. I backed into the store, my heart thumping. "Ben," I whispered. "Ben, wake up." "What?" he mumbled. "Listen." We both lay there in the dark. Silence. "I don't hear anything, man," he said. It was a noise, like hammering, from the mine. Ben sat up. "You're just spooked. Go back to sleep." But he was spooked too. Neither of us slept much after that. The next morning we decided to explore the mine. We were explorers after all. We had helmets, powerful lights, and we were roped together. The entrance was a crumbling wooden archway. The air coming out was freezing and smelled like rust. We went in. It was a mine. Dark, wet, cramped. The main tunnel was shored up with rotting timbers. It went straight back into the mountain. We walked for maybe 15 minutes. The only sounds were our boots and our own breathing. "This is getting sketchy," Ben said, shining his light on a cracked support beam. "I don't think we should go much further." "Agreed," I said. "Let's get some B-roll and get out." I panned my camera around. The tunnel was empty, just rocks and mud. As I turned back toward the entrance, my headlamp beam caught something. In a small alcove just off the main path was a pile of things. They were old, rusty mining tools, a pickaxe, a shovel, and a small tin lunch pail. But they weren't covered in 100 years of dust. They were clean, and they were arranged in a neat little pile. Next to them, on the wall, someone had scrawled a word in the mud. It was fresh. "Get out." "Mark," Ben whispered, his voice shaking. "We're leaving. Now." We didn't run, but we walked very, very fast. We didn't talk. We just walked, thump, 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 back to the circle of daylight at the entrance. When we got outside, we both bent over, hands on our knees, just breathing. Who is up here?" Ben panted. "A hermit? A prospector?" I said. "I don't know. But we're packing up." We hurried back to the general store. We were shoving gear into our bags, not even bothering to pack it neatly. That's when Ben stopped. "My audio recorders," he said. "I forgot." "Leave a man. It's not worth it." "No way," he said, stubborn as always. "That's $1,000 worth of gear. I'm getting them. You pack, I'll be right back." Before I could argue, he was gone, running toward the saloon. I kept packing. I was zipping up my bag when Ben came back. His face was white. He wasn't running, he was just walking, stiffly. "Ben, you okay?" He was holding one of the digital recorders in his hand, headphones plugged in. He held it out to me. I listened to the saloon recording. "What? Did it pick up the wind?" Just listen," he said. He handed me the headphones. I put them on. At first, all I heard was a low-level hiss, the sound of an empty room. Then I heard the wind pick up, the howl I'd heard last night, and under the wind, a sound. It was faint at first. It was music, a tinny plinking sound. The player piano. The piano in the saloon. The one with the yellowed, broken keys. It was playing. It wasn't a full song, just random, discordant notes. Plink, plunk, plink. "Okay," I said, pulling the headphones off. "That's weird. The wind must be vibrating the strings." "Keep listening," Ben said, his voice flat. I put them back on. The piano music continued for about 5 minutes. And then I heard footsteps, heavy boots, walking on the wooden floor of the saloon. They walked up to the piano. The music stopped. Then a voice. It was a low, gravelly whisper. It was right next to the microphone. It said, "Pretty, but not as pretty as silver." Then I heard the footsteps walk out of the saloon. I heard the creak of the saloon's batwing doors. And then I heard the footsteps on the street, walking toward the general store. The recording stopped. I ripped the headphones off. I looked at Ben. When did it stop?" "Right before I got there," he whispered. "It's on a loop. He's been playing that for I don't know how long." "Did you get the others?" I asked. "No, I'm not going back out there." We grabbed our bags. We left everything else. The stove, the cots, 2 other recorders. We ran. We ran the full 2 miles down that mountain, not stopping, not looking back. We never posted the video. We deleted the channel. The audio file? I still have it. It's on an old hard drive. Sometimes I think about listening to it again, to see if I'm just crazy, but I don't, because I know what I heard. I know that the person who warned us out of the mine, was not the same person who was playing the piano. Iron Bell wasn't abandoned. It was just occupied by the people who never left, and they don't like new neighbors. My job isn't exciting. I'm a land surveyor. I spend my days walking in straight lines, staring at a GPS rod, and hammering wooden stakes into the ground. It's mostly tedious, occasionally peaceful, and almost never dangerous. That's what I thought anyway until I got the contract for the Blackwood Reservoir expansion. The job was simple on paper. The state was finally acquiring the last bits of land around the reservoir, which included the flooded, abandoned village of Ellison Creek. It was a tiny farming community that got bought out and flooded back in the late 1970s. Now, with the new high water mark, my company was hired to remap the perimeter for a new conservation easement. It was a solo job expected to take about a week. I drove out on a Monday morning in late October. The air was cold with that damp, metallic smell of decaying leaves and mud. The village was barely recognizable. The main road dipped directly into the dark, still water of the reservoir. On the far side, the top floor and steeple of an old white church poked out of the water like a gravestone. Most of my work, however, would be in the woods that ringed the new shoreline, mapping the boundaries of the properties that were now underwater. The first day was exactly what I expected. Quiet, boring. I set up my base station, a tripod with a GPS unit, near my truck. I spent 8 hours methodically walking, stopping, and planting wooden stakes with pink plastic ribbons. The only sounds were the click beep of my data collector, the thud of my mallet, and the occasional cry of a hawk. The silence was thick, heavy. By 4 p.m., I had set my first line of 28 markers, packed up my gear, and driven the hour back to my motel. The second day is when things started to feel off. I got to the site around 7 a.m. The fog was so thick I could barely see 50 feet. I booted up my equipment and started walking the line to my last marker from the day before, so I could continue the survey. I found the spot, but the marker was gone. I checked my data collector. I was in the right place, give or take a few inches. The stake, a 2-foot piece of hardwood, was just gone. Great, I muttered, figuring some local kids had pulled it. Annoyed, I hammered in a new one and continued my work, pushing deeper into the woods that paralleled the water. Around noon, I found the missing stake. It was about 100 yards away from its original spot, hammered into the soft mud right at the water's edge. This was weird. It wasn't just pulled and tossed. Someone had taken the time to mallet it back into the ground, perfectly plumb, in a completely new location. I felt a small, cold knot in my stomach. It felt territorial. I pulled it out, tossed it aside, and tried to ignore it. But the atmosphere of the place had changed. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was watchful. I kept catching movement at the edge of my vision, but when I'd turn, it was just the sway of a branch or the ripple of water. The air was dead calm, but I'd hear very faintly what sounded like a footstep on dry leaves, always just behind me. I worked late trying to make up for the lost time. As the sun started to dip, casting long purple shadows, I was near the ruins of an old farmhouse, just a foundation and a collapsed chimney. That's when I saw the second one. It was another wooden stake, but it wasn't one of mine. This one was old. The wood was waterlogged and dark gray, almost black. It was whittled to a point at one end and the top was carved. It wasn't an elaborate carving, just a simple shape. It looked like a crude, lopsided eye. It was driven into the ground right in the middle of the foundation, pointing toward the water, toward the sunken church. I didn't touch it. I just packed up my gear, my hands feeling stiff and cold. I walked back to my truck faster than I should have, glancing over my shoulder the whole way. The woods were dark and quiet. Too quiet. That night at the motel, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that carved eye. There was a message. I'm a surveyor, I work with boundaries. This felt like someone else's boundary. I almost called my boss and told him I was quitting the job. But I'm stubborn and I needed the paycheck. I told myself it was just some local hermit trying to spook me. The third day I went back. I was on edge. I carried my heavy mallet in my hand, not in my belt. I decided to work on the other side of the access road, away from the water. It was just dense forest, no ruins, no water. Safer. For hours it was fine. I found my rhythm. Walk, stop, beep, thud. The sun was out and I started to feel foolish. I was letting my imagination get the better of me. Around 3 p.m. I was taking a reading when my base station, back at the truck half a mile away, sent a signal error to my collector. It meant it had lost connection. Probably just a satellite glitch. I decided to pack it in for the day and check the base station. I walked the half mile back, following my own trail of pink ribbons. When I got to the clearing, my truck was there. My tripod base station was not. It was gone. The heavy tripod, the $10,000 GPS unit, the battery pack. Gone. The ground where it had stood was undisturbed, except for 3 deep, circular indentations in the dirt. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. This was a serious theft. I was furious and I was terrified. I fumbled for my phone to call the police, but there was no signal as usual. I'd have to drive to the main road. I threw my rod and my pack into the truck, my heart hammering. As I grabbed the door handle, I paused. There was something on the windshield. It was my first missing steak, the one from yesterday. It was laid across the driver's side wiper, and tied to it with a piece of dirty twine was a small dead catfish. I stared at it. My breath fogged up the glass. This was so specific, so personal, a warning, a threat. And then I heard it, a splash. It came from the water, down by the submerged church. It was a loud, deliberate splash like someone dropping a heavy rock. I looked toward the sound. The fog was rolling back in as the air cooled, and the church steeple was just a dark silhouette. Another splash, closer this time. I ripped the steak off the windshield, threw it on the ground, and jumped in the truck. The engine turned over with a roar that felt impossibly loud. I slammed it into reverse, spun around on the gravel, and peeled out. As I sped down the dirt road, my headlights cut through the dusk, and I saw him, just for a second. He was standing at the edge of the woods where the base station had been. He was tall and gaunt, wearing what looked like a soaking wet canvas duster coat. He was holding the tripod. Not like he was going to steal it, but like it was a staff. His face was just a pale, shadowed blur in the twilight. He didn't move. He just watched me leave. I never went back. I called my boss from the highway and told him the equipment had been stolen and the site was unsafe. The company had to eat the cost of the equipment. I was reprimanded, but I didn't care. I found a new job in a different state a month later. I still dream about it. I dream about the fog, the smell of the mud, and the sound of that splash. But mostly, I dream about that figure. He wasn't a ghost. He was a man. A man who lived in a drowned town, a man who had his own boundaries, and a man who was very, very good at making people understand when they were not welcome. In the summer of 2008, right after my sophomore year of college, I got a mind-numbingly boring job. I was an asset management intern for a county appraisal district. My job was to go to county-owned properties, schools, clinics, office buildings, and tag everything with a barcode. Desks, chairs, computers, fire extinguishers. If it wasn't bolted down, I tagged it. It was dull, but it was air-conditioned. Until I got the Oak Haven assignment. Oak Haven Sanatorium was a massive, sprawling campus built in the 1930s for tuberculosis patients. It had its own power plant, water tower, staff housing, and a main hospital building that was a mile long. It was shut down in the 70s and had been sitting empty ever since. The county had finally decided to sell the land, and before the demolition, they needed a complete inventory of items of historical value. That was me. My boss, a tired-looking woman named Sharon, gave me a set of keys, a map, and a box of 5,000 barcode stickers. "The power's on," she said, "but the AC is dead. Bring a fan and a flashlight. A lot of the bulbs are out. Oh, and they say the West Wing is unstable. So, don't go there." I drove out. The campus was 20 miles out of town, surrounded by a high wrought iron fence. I used my key to open the massive, creaking gate and drove down a long, overgrown drive. The place was a masterpiece of creepy architecture. Red brick, Gothic-style towers and hundreds of windows, all staring at me. I parked in front of the admissions building. The air was hot, thick, and still. The only sound was the thrum of insects in the overgrown lawns. I let myself in. The inside was surreal. It was a perfect time capsule from 1970. Peeling avocado green paint. A waiting room with orange vinyl chairs. Decades of dust covered everything, but underneath it was all intact. The electricity was on as promised. A single, flickering fluorescent light in the hallway buzzed, casting a sickly light. The air smelled of mold, dust, and old paper. My job was to start in the staff building and work my way to the main hospital. The first few days were just weird and lonely. I'd spend 8 hours a day all by myself in this massive, silent complex. I'd walk into an office and it would look like the person just stepped out. A coffee cup still on the desk, papers in a typewriter. I'd stick a barcode on the desk, the chair, the filing cabinet, and move on. The sound in that place was strange. The silence was so complete that I started to hear things. The tick, tick, tick of the building settling. The drip of a leaky pipe, echoing from 3 floors away. My own footsteps were monstrously loud on the linoleum floors. On the 3rd day, I was in the nurses' dormitory. It was a long, dark building. I was in one of the small rooms tagging a metal bed frame when I heard a creak in the hallway. I froze. Hello? Nothing. I chalked it up to the building. I went back to work. A few minutes later, I heard it again. A distinct wooden creak. The sound of a footstep on the old hardwood floor in the hall. Hello? Sharon? Is that you? Silence. I peeked out. The hallway was empty. It was about 200 feet long and all the doors to the other rooms were closed. Except for one. The one at the far end. It was open. Just a crack. I knew I had closed that door. I had just been in there. It was my system. Work a room, close the door, move to the next. I stood there for a full minute, my heart pounding. The buzzing of the insects outside felt distant. Slowly I walked down the hall. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. Just a bed frame, a desk, a dresser, and a thick layer of dust on the floor. Except for one spot. In the center of the room there was a perfect, clear set of footprints. Bare feet. Leading from the hallway, walking a small circle in the middle of the room and then stopping. They didn't lead back out. I ran. I grabbed my bag, sprinted to my car and drove away. I sat in my car at a gas station for an hour, shaking. I almost quit, but I was a broke college kid. I convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe another intern. Maybe one of the demolition guys scouting the place. I went back the next day. I avoided the dormitory. I went to the main hospital. The hospital was 10 times worse. It was a maze of long, green-tiled hallways. The West Wing, my boss had warned me about, was boarded up from the inside with a heavy chain and padlock on the double doors. A sign, hand-painted on the plywood, said, "Do not open. Condemned." I was working in the solarium, a large, circular room with floor-to-ceiling windows. This was where the patients used to sit in the sun. It was filled with old, metal-framed wheelchairs, dozens of them, all facing the windows. I was tagging them. Beep, sick, beep, sick. I was working on a chair in the front row when I got that feeling again. The one I'd had in the dormitory. The feeling of being watched. I turned around slowly. All the wheelchairs in the back row had been turned. They were no longer facing the windows. They were facing me. I didn't hear a sound. Not a creak. Not a single wheel. They were just moved. I backed away slowly. My eyes were scanning the room. "This isn't funny," I yelled. "Whoever you are, stop it." My voice just echoed in the huge empty room. And then, a single tiny squeak. One of the wheelchairs, in the middle of the pack, its left wheel, moved. It turned maybe a quarter of an inch, all by itself. It was impossible. The floor was level. There was no breeze. I dropped my barcode scanner and I bolted. I ran down the hall, my footsteps echoing. Thump, thump, thump. And I heard, behind me, squeak thump, squeak thump, squeak thump. It was the sound of other footsteps. And the squeak, squeak, squeak of an old, unoiled wheel. I didn't look back. I sprinted for the exit. I burst out into the hot, humid sunlight. I ran to my car. As I was jamming my key into the ignition, I looked back at the hospital. The solarium was on the 3rd floor. The big, curved windows were dark, covered in grime. Except for one. It was clean. Wiped clean. And in the window, a figure was standing. Just a dark silhouette. Was watching me. As I watched, a hand, a pale, thin hand, came up and it waved. A slow, long-fingered wave. I drove through the gate and I didn't even stop to close it. I called Sharon from the road. I told her I was sick. I told her I quit. I found out later that the county canceled the demolition. The official reason was asbestos concerns. But the guys in the appraisal office, they had a different story. They said the demo crew walked off the job. They said the residents didn't want to leave. I still have nightmares about that place. I dream of green tiles and the sound of that single squeaking wheel following me down a dark hall. I'm a photographer. Not a very successful one, but I'm passionate. My specialty is heikyo, the Japanese art of exploring abandoned places. I photographed abandoned schools, hospitals, theme parks. There's a beauty to them, a Japanese concept called mono no aware, a sadness for the impermanence of things. But I was always searching for the Holy Grail, a place that wasn't just abandoned but legendary. I found it in the rumors of Hirasawa. Hirasawa wasn't a real place, not officially. It was an internet urban legend, like Japan's version of the Inanaki village. The story was that deep in the mountains of the Kii Peninsula, there was a village that fell out of time. A place where, in the 1960s, the entire population vanished. The legend said that the village was cursed, that anyone who found it would be taken, and that electronics would fail, compasses would spin. It was all nonsense, of course, but through some deep diving on old forums, I found a possible set of coordinates. They were in a remote, dense forest, miles from any known road. I had to go. I rented a small 4x4 and drove as far as I could, until the logging road became a river of mud. The weather was turning. A typhoon was grazing the coast, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple. A cold, heavy rain had already started. I put on my rain gear, grabbed my camera bag, which was in a waterproof Pelican case, and my hiking gear. I told myself I'd just hike for 2 hours. If I found nothing, I'd turn back. 2 hours turned into 4. The forest was wrong. The trees were too dense. The rain muffled all sound. My compass was actually spinning. I laughed, thinking it was just magnetic interference. My GPS was dead. I was about to give up. I was cold, wet, and officially lost. I was a fool. I crested a small ridge, pushed through a wall of wet bamboo, and I found it. It was real. It was a small village, maybe 10 houses, nestled in a valley so narrow it was more of a scar. A small, fast-moving stream cut through it. The houses were old, traditional Minka with heavy, moss-covered thatched roofs. It was exactly as the legend described. Abandoned. The rain was coming down in sheets. I needed shelter. I made for the largest house, which looked like it might have been an inn. I slid open the heavy wooden door. The inside was pristine. I don't mean clean. It was covered in dust, but it was untouched. Tatami mats still on the floor. A small iron tea kettle sitting on a cold irori or hearth. It was as if the owners had just evaporated. I set my bag down in the main room. "Thank you," I said, bowing to the empty room. "It's a sign of respect." I pulled out my camera. This was it, the motherlode. I started shooting. The light was fading fast, but the gloom was perfect. The rain on the roof, the dark wood, the empty spaces. It was beautiful. I was in the kitchen. It was just a small dirt floor room. I was photographing an old wooden cabinet when I noticed something. On the floor in the packed dirt was a line, a thick white line. It was made of salt. Someone had drawn a thick line of salt across the threshold of the kitchen door. My blood chilled. I knew what that was. In Japanese folklore, salt is for purification. It's for keeping things out. I backed away slowly. I looked around the main room, and now I saw them. Foot up. Paper talismans covered in black, handwritten kanji. They were tacked on every window, on every door, all facing in. These weren't to keep things out of the house. They were to keep something in. I heard a sound. It was not the rain. It was a bell. A small, single, high-pitched ting came from upstairs. This house, like most old Minka, had a second floor, a low-ceilinged attic, mostly used for storage. I hadn't seen a staircase. Ting. There it was again. Faint. Delicate. I looked around the room. In the back, in the darkest corner, I saw it. Not a staircase. A ladder. Leading up to a square, dark hole in the ceiling. I'm not a brave man. I am a photographer. My curiosity, it's a curse. I had to know. I pulled my flashlight from my bag. I walked to the ladder. "Hello," I whispered. Silence. Just the rain. I put my foot on the first rung. It was solid. I climbed. Up into the dark. My head rose above the floor. I shined my light around. It was an attic. Low beams thick with dust and cobwebs. Old chests. Rolled up futons. And dolls. The attic was full of dolls. Traditional Heian-era dolls. Hundreds of them. They were sitting on shelves, on the chests, on the floor. All of them, staring at the ladder. Their faces were white porcelain. Their eyes were glass. Their hair was black silk. I felt sick. This was too much. This was someone's shrine. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I started to back down the ladder. Ting. The sound was right behind me. I spun around. In the center of the room, there was a doll that hadn't been there before. It was larger than the others. It was an ikematsu doll, a friendship doll about 3 feet tall. It was dressed in a red silk kimono, and in its small porcelain hand was a small brass bell. Its other hand was raised. It was waving at me. I fell. I fell off the ladder, crashing onto the tatami mats below. I landed hard on my shoulder. Pain shot through my arm. I scrambled to my feet. I grabbed my Pelican case. I didn't care about the tripod, the lights. I just grabbed the case. I ran to the door. I slid it open. The village was no longer empty. On the porch of every house, a figure was standing. They were all standing in the rain, silhouetted against the dusk. They weren't people. They were things. They were shaped like people, but they were wrong. Too tall, too thin. Their arms were too long. They were all silent, staring at me. And from the house I had just left, from the attic, I heard it. Ting, 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 ting. The bell. It was getting faster. It was angry. One of the figures, the one closest to me, took a step. It unfolded. It was like a stop-motion film. A jerky, unnatural movement. I ran. I ran into the woods. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran, the rain lashing my face, the bamboo hitting me. I could hear them. They weren't running. They were just moving. I could hear the slap of their feet on the mud. Ting-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. The bell was everywhere. It was in front of me. It was behind me. It was in my head. I ran until I collapsed. I fell into the mud at the bank of a raging stream. I just gave up. I woke up in my car. I was in the driver's seat. My clothes were soaking wet. My body ached. My shoulder was dislocated. My camera case was in the passenger seat. It was morning. The rain had stopped. I had no memory of the run, no memory of finding my way back. It was a 4-hour hike. I had no memory of it. I drove to a hospital. I told them I fell while hiking. The photos? The photos were blank. The memory card was corrupted. Every single file, except one. It wasn't a photo I took. It couldn't have been. It must have been a glitch, a data write error. It was a photo of me. It was taken from above, from the attic. It was a picture of me standing in the main room photographing the kitchen. My back was to the ladder. It's a dark photo, but you can see me. And in the dark square hole of the attic, just visible, is a small white porcelain face. I quit photography. I moved to the city. I don't go to the mountains anymore. The legend of Hirasawa, it's not a story about a place. It's a story about a trap. The village is the bait. And the dolls, they just want new friends.